Captain Lee Jun walked slowly across the metal floor of the ship's bridge. His boots made soft clicking sounds in the quiet space. Outside the large windows, stars looked like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. But Lee was not looking at the stars. He was looking at papers in his hands, and these papers made him feel sick. The papers were full of reports, strange reports, reports that talked about things that should not exist. For many years, humans had been traveling through space. They built homes on distant planets. They dug for metals on rocky worlds. They sent messages across the galaxy. And sometimes, very bad things happened to them. Research stations would stop talking. When other humans came to check, they found empty rooms. Tables still had food on them. Beds were still warm, but no people. The people were gone, just gone. Space crews would disappear too. Their ships would be found floating in the dark. All the machines still worked. All the lights were still on. But the people inside were nowhere to be found. Some humans survived these strange events, but when they tried to tell others what they saw, people did not believe them. The survivors talked about monsters. They talked about things with too many teeth. They talked about shadows that moved wrong. They talked about creatures that could walk through walls, like walking through water. The survivors are crazy, people said. Space makes people see things that are not there. Lee put the papers down on his desk. His hands were shaking a little. "Sir," said a voice behind him. Lee turned around. It was Park Min, a young woman who worked with the ship's communication systems. "Sir, we are getting a message from the Altarian Council." Lee nodded. The Altarians were aliens. They looked like big insects, but they could think and talk, just like humans. They were friends with humans most of the time. The big screen in front of Lee began to glow. Soon, an alien face appeared on it. This was Ambassador Veltar. He had 4 eyes and a mouth that looked like scissors. His skin was green and shiny. "Captain Lee," said Veltar. His voice sounded like wind blowing through metal tubes. "We must talk about the recent disappearances in Sector 7. The old ones are stirring again." Lee felt tired. He had heard this same warning many times before. The aliens were always talking about old ones, and ancient hunters, and things that should not be. They said these monsters lived in the dark spaces between stars. They said these monsters ate people's minds and souls. But Lee was a human. Humans believed in facts. They believed in things they could see, and touch, and measure. "Ambassador," Lee said, trying to be polite, "we need proof. We need numbers. We need something we can study in our laboratories." Veltar made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. He did this when he was angry or frustrated. "Your people's need for proof will kill you all. Some things are true even if you cannot put them in a jar and look at them under a microscope." The screen went dark. Veltar had ended the conversation. Lee stood alone on the bridge for a moment. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Kim Hannah walking toward him. She was the ship's science officer. She was very smart and knew a lot about space and planets and alien life. But today, Hannah looked worried. She carried a small computer in her hands. "Captain," she said quietly, "I have more reports. 3 more colonies stopped sending messages this week. That makes 17 colonies in the past month." Lee felt cold inside his chest. 17 colonies meant thousands of people. Maybe tens of thousands. "Equipment problems?" he asked. Hannah shook her head. "The automatic systems are still working. Weather reports, mining updates, cargo manifests. All normal. But no human voices, no video calls, nothing." Lee rubbed his forehead with his fingers. There had to be simple explanations. Machines broke sometimes. Solar storms could damage communication equipment. Maybe space pirates were attacking the colonies. "Solar flares," he suggested. "No unusual solar activity in any of those systems. Pirate attacks. No signs of weapons fire. No destroyed buildings. No stolen cargo. Lee walked to the big window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the dark between those tiny lights, people were disappearing. Maybe they were dead. Maybe they were suffering. Maybe they were calling for help and no one could hear them. But what could be taking them? What could make thousands of people disappear without leaving any trace? The aliens said it was monsters. Ancient things that hunted in the void. Creatures. Older than human civilization. But that was impossible. There were no such things as monsters. Humans had explored space for over 100 years. They had met dozens of alien species. They had studied thousands of planets. Everything they found could be explained by science. Everything had a reason. Everything followed rules. Lee turned away from the window. He was wrong about that, but he did not know it yet. Soon, very soon, he would learn that the universe was much stranger and more dangerous than humans had ever imagined. The dead ship floated in the darkness, like a sleeping giant. It was a Zephyrian ship, made by the bird-like aliens, who were known for building beautiful spacecraft. Their ships usually had smooth curves and graceful lines that looked like art, but this ship looked wrong. Very wrong. Lee stared at it through the window of his own ship. The angles of the dead ship hurt his eyes when he looked at them. The shadows on its hull fell in the wrong directions. Some shadows pointed up instead of down. Some shadows existed where there should be light. "Something is not right about that ship," said Kim Hana, standing next to Lee. She was holding a scanner in her hands, but it was making strange beeping sounds. "It's just damaged," Lee said. But even as he said it, he felt cold fear growing in his stomach. Lee called his best soldiers and engineers. "We're going aboard," he told them. "Find out what happened to the crew. Look for survivors. Check the ship's computers for records." The soldiers put on their spacesuits and took their weapons. They climbed into a small shuttle and flew across the dark space between the two ships. Lee watched them disappear into the dead ship through a hole in its side. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. Then Lee's communication device started making noise. "Boarding party, report," Lee said into the device. At first, there was only static, the kind of noise radios make when they can't find a signal. Then, Lee heard something that made his blood turn cold, screaming. The screaming lasted for about 10 seconds, then silence. "Boarding party, respond." Lee shouted into the device. Nothing. Down in the engine room of Lee's ship, Chief Engineer Choi Dae was watching his instruments with growing fear. All the numbers on his screens were going crazy. The computers were showing impossible readings. Something was moving inside the dead ship, something big. But Choi Dae's sensors could not see what it was. The thing did not show up on any of his machines. It was invisible to all their technology, but it was definitely there. Choi Dae could tell, because as it moved through the dead ship's corridors, it left behind twisted pieces of metal and strange dark stains that looked like blood, but could not be blood because the stains moved and shifted like they were alive. "Captain," came a voice over the communication system. It was Dr. Yoon Soo, the ship's doctor. Her voice sounded scared and confused. "Some of our people are coming back from the dead ship, but something is wrong with them." Lee ran to the medical bay. When he got there, he saw 3 of his soldiers sitting on beds. They were alive, but their eyes looked empty and far away. "What's wrong with them?" Lee asked. "They keep talking about the walls," Dr. Yoon said quietly. "They say the walls are breathing. They say the floors are soft like skin. They say they can hear voices calling to them from inside the metal." One of the soldiers looked up at Lee. The soldier's face was pale and covered in sweat. "Captain," the soldier whispered, "the ship is alive. It's hungry, and it knows we're here now." Lee did not know what to say. He left the medical bay and walked quickly through the corridors of his own ship until he found the alien they had rescued weeks ago. This was Kethmer, a Zephyrian scientist whose own research ship had been attacked by unknown forces. Kethmer was hiding in a small room, sitting in the corner with his knees pulled up to his chest. He had 4 eyes, and all 4 eyes were wide with fear. "You didn't listen," Kethmer said when he saw Lee. His voice was so quiet, it was almost a whisper. "We tried to warn you. We tried to tell all humans about the hungry dark, about the things that eat minds and souls. But humans always want proof. Now, they have found you, and they know about your species." "What are they?" Lee asked. He was no longer trying to sound brave or confident. "They are older than the stars," Kethmer said. "They existed before planets were born. They live in the empty spaces between thoughts. They live in the cracks where reality becomes thin and weak. Every time humans build new colonies, every time you send ships deeper into space, you ring a bell that calls to them. You tell them where to find food." Lee looked through a window toward the dead ship. He could see some of his crew members moving around inside it, but they were moving wrong. Their bodies bent in ways that human bodies should not bend. They walked through walls like the walls were made of water. They moved too fast and too slow at the same time. "How do we fight them?" Lee asked. Kethmer looked at him with all 4 eyes. "You can't fight them. You can only run, and hope they don't follow." But it was too late for running. That night, while Lee was trying to sleep, 17 more of his crew members disappeared. He found their uniforms lying empty on the floor. The uniforms still smelled like the people who had worn them, but the people were gone. The only thing left behind was a strange smell in the air. It smelled like lightning and burning metal and something else. Something that reminded Lee of nightmares. The big meeting room on Earth was full of shouting and fear. The most important people in the human government sat around a long table, looking at floating pictures in the air. These pictures showed terrible things. Admiral Song Haeon stood at the front of the room. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had not slept in 3 days. The pictures floating in front of him showed maps of human space. Many of the dots on the map that should have been green were now red. Red meant dead. Red meant silent. Red meant gone. "Show them the numbers," Song said to Dr. Kongwu. Dr. Kong was a thin man who usually worked with computers and data. Today, his hands shook as he read from his papers. "Kepler Colony," he said in a quiet voice. "Population was 2 million people. Last message received 6 days ago. Now silent." The people around the table listened with growing horror. Nubusa Colony, 3.5 million people. Silent for 4 days. Terra Nova Station. 500,000 researchers and workers. No contact for a week. Dr. Kong's voice became even quieter. Total population loss so far, 4,200,000,000 people. Defense Minister Lim Sun jumped up from her chair. She was a strong woman who had been a soldier before becoming a politician. Her face was red with anger and fear. "This is impossible," she shouted, hitting the table with her fist. "Entire planets don't just disappear. There has to be an explanation. Mass sickness. Some kind of poison gas. Maybe enemy weapons we don't know about." "Minister," Dr. Kong said carefully, "we have found some survivors. Not many, but a few. They all tell the same story." "What story?" "They say things came out of the darkness. Things that could walk through walls, like walls were made of air. Things that made reality ... bend. They say their weapons stopped working. Their computers stopped working. Even their flashlights stopped working." Minister Lim sat back down heavily. "That's crazy talk. Trauma makes people see things." "Admiral." Song touched a button on the table. A new picture appeared in the air. It was a video recording from inside a military ship. The camera was shaking because whoever was holding it was scared. In the video, something moved down a hallway. It might have been human once, but now it was wrong. Its arms were too long, its legs bent backward. And as it moved, the hallway around it started to change. The same hallway appeared again and again, like reflections in mirrors. but each reflection was different. Some hallways had the ceiling on the floor. Some had doors that opened into more doors. Some had walls that breathed like living skin. "Turn it off," whispered Minister Lim. But Admiral Song did not turn it off. "This is what we're fighting," he said. "This is what killed 4 billion people." Intelligence Chief Bei Jin cleared her throat. She was an older woman who knew many secrets. "Admiral, I have been talking to our alien allies, the ones we've made trade agreements with over the years. What do they say?" "They say they've been fighting these things for thousands of years. They have special weapons, devices that can hurt creatures that exist partially outside normal reality. They've been trying to warn us, but we never listened." Admiral Song felt sick. "We called their warnings superstition." "Yes, sir, we did." Chief Bei touched her own button. New pictures appeared, showing strange alien weapons that looked nothing like human guns or bombs. They call them quantum entangled weapons, consciousness field disruptors, tools designed to fight enemies that don't follow the laws of physics as we understand them. "Why didn't they force us to listen?" asked Minister Lim. "They tried, sir, but humans always demanded scientific proof. We wanted to see these creatures in laboratories. We wanted to measure them and study them. The aliens said that was impossible because these creatures exist in places where measurement and study don't work." Admiral Song walked to the big windows of the meeting room. Outside, he could see the lights of Earth's cities. Millions of lights stretching to the horizon. Beautiful and peaceful. But Song knew that soon, those lights would start going out. One by one, city by city, as the creatures that had destroyed the colonies came to Earth. "How long do we have?" he asked. Dr. Kang looked at his papers. "Based on the pattern of attacks, maybe 3 months. Maybe less." "Can we evacuate everyone? 4 billion people?" "No, sir, not possible." Song turned back to face the room. "Then, we learn to fight them. We contact every alien species that has these special weapons. We buy them, steal them, or learn to make them ourselves." "Sir," said Chief Bei quietly, "there's something else. The aliens say these creatures are drawn to advanced civilizations. The more technology a species has, the more attractive they are to these predators. Humanity's rapid expansion into space has been like ringing a dinner bell across the galaxy." Song nodded grimly. The same human curiosity and ambition that had carried them to the stars was now bringing death to their door. They had spent centuries believing that the universe operated by logical rules they could understand and control. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Colonel No-jun walked carefully through the broken streets of what used to be New Seoul Colony. 1 year ago, this had been a beautiful city with tall buildings, parks, and 2 million people living happy lives. Now it looked like a nightmare. The buildings were twisted into impossible shapes. Some grew upward and downward at the same time. Others had windows that showed the inside of different buildings miles away. The streets curved in directions that hurt to think about. Jun wore special armor that sparkled with strange lights. The armor was covered in symbols and wires that the best human scientists had designed after studying alien technology for months. His helmet had a screen that showed him things his normal eyes could not see. Behind him walked his team of 12 soldiers. They were the 47th Monster Response Squad, and they were humanity's best weapon against the creatures that had killed billions of people. "Colonel," whispered Sergeant Oh-hai into her throat microphone, "I'm getting readings ahead. Something big." Jun looked at the small screen on his wrist. Normal radios did not work in places like this. The monsters ate radio waves the same way humans ate food. So the soldiers used a different kind of communication system that the aliens had taught them to build. "How big?" Jun asked quietly. "Class 7, maybe Class 8. It's hiding in what used to be the shopping center." Jun felt his heart beat faster. Class 7 monsters could kill 100 normal humans in minutes. Class 8 monsters could destroy entire city blocks just by existing near them. But Jun and his team were not normal humans anymore. The shopping center ahead of them looked like a building that had been put through a blender and then reassembled by someone who had never seen a building before. Stairs led to nowhere. Doors opened onto empty air. And in the center of it all, something was moving. The thing that came out of the ruined shopping center was impossible to describe. It had too many parts, and the parts were in too many places at once. Sometimes it looked like a giant spider made of shadows. Sometimes it looked like a cloud of teeth and eyes. Sometimes it looked like a hole in reality itself. Looking at it made Chen's eyes water and his brain hurt. Two of his soldiers started crying blood, which was normal when humans looked directly at these creatures. Engage. Jun shouted. The squad opened fire with weapons that looked like they came from science fiction movies. Their guns shot bullets made from crystallized time and space. Their grenades exploded in 7 different dimensions at once. Their rifles fired beams of concentrated reality that could force the monsters to follow normal laws of physics. The monster made a sound that was not really a sound. It was more like a scream that existed only inside the soldiers' minds. But the soldiers had been trained for this. They wore special helmets that protected their thoughts. As the strange weapons hit it, the monster started to change. Its impossible shape began to collapse into something that made sense. Its too many arms became a normal number of arms. Its everywhere at once body became a body that existed in only one place. And then, with a final mental scream, it died. 3,000 miles away on Earth, Dr. Shinyu sat in a laboratory watching the battle on dozens of screens. He was monitoring the fight, using sensors that detected changes in reality itself. "Sir," said his assistant, researcher on Bo, "the probability readings are returning to normal levels. The Colonel's team has successfully eliminated the entity." Dr. Shinyu nodded and made notes on his computer. 1 year ago, he had been a normal physicist who studied stars and planets. Today, he was humanity's leading expert on monsters that should not exist. It had been the fastest learning curve in human history. When the attacks first started, humans had tried to fight the monsters with normal weapons. Bullets, bombs, and lasers did nothing. The creatures simply ignored them or ate them like snacks. So, humanity had done what humanity always did when faced with an impossible problem. They studied it until it became possible. They captured pieces of dead monsters and examined them under microscopes that had been redesigned to see things that existed in multiple dimensions. They read ancient books written by alien species that had fought these creatures for thousands of years. They learned to build weapons from materials that were more idea than matter. Most importantly, they learned that the monsters followed rules, strange rules that normal physics books did not talk about, but rules nonetheless. And if something followed rules, humans could learn those rules and find ways to break them. "How many systems have we cleared now?" Dr. Shinyu asked. 17 star systems are now confirmed, monster-free, Anbo replied. And we're getting requests for help from alien governments that have been dealing with these creatures for millennia. Dr. Shinyu allowed himself a small smile. The same stubborn human refusal to accept the impossible that had made them ignore alien warnings was now making them the galaxy's best monster hunters. Other species had learned to hide from the creatures, or to build barriers to keep them away, or to sacrifice small populations to keep the monsters fed and happy. Humans had learned to kill them in the ruins of New Soul Colony. Colonel Jun and his squad were already moving toward their next target. There were still dozens of monsters, hiding in the twisted remains of the city, and the squad's job was to hunt down every single one. It was dangerous work. But Jun had stopped being afraid months ago. These creatures had killed his family, his friends, and billions of other humans. Now, it was humanity's turn to do the killing. Admiral Lee Jun stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the stars through enormous windows. The ship was called Reality's Edge. and it was unlike any ship humans had ever built before. Its hull was made from metal that existed in several dimensions at once. Its engines ran on crystallized time. Its weapons could shoot holes in the fabric of space itself. 3 years ago, Lee had been just a captain who did not believe in monsters. Today, he commanded a fleet of ships that hunted those monsters across the galaxy. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Han Sol from her position at the communications station, "we're getting an emergency call from the Altarian home system. They say they have a Class 7 reality breach and need our help immediately." Lee smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had found new prey. "Set course for Altarian space," he commanded. "Use maximum probability drive." The ship began to change around them. Reality became soft and bendable. The stars outside the windows stretched into long lines of light. Space folded like a piece of paper being creased. In seconds, they traveled distances that would have taken normal ships months to cross. This was how humans traveled now. They had learned to use the same impossible physics that the monsters used. Meanwhile, in a laboratory deep inside the ship, Dr. Kim Hanna was putting the final touches on humanity's newest weapon. She was now the director of anomalous weapons development, which was a fancy way of saying she designed tools for killing impossible things. The weapon on her workbench looked like a torpedo, but it was made from materials that would have made scientists crazy just a few years ago. Metal that was liquid and solid at the same time. Electronics that ran on thoughts instead of electricity. Explosive material that could detonate in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. "Director," said her assistant, researcher Go Yoon, "this new torpedo design is amazing. How does it track targets across so many planes of existence?" Hannah wiped her hands on a towel and looked at her creation with pride. "It follows the target's reality signature. Every monster leaves a trail in the fabric of space-time. This torpedo can follow that trail no matter where the monster tries to hide." Go Yoon shook his head in wonder. "It's strange to think that 3 years ago, we didn't even believe these creatures existed." "That's the irony," Hannah said. "Our greatest weakness became our greatest strength." "What do you mean?" "For so long, we refused to believe in the impossible. When other species warned us about monsters, we demanded proof. We wanted to study everything, in laboratories. We thought if we couldn't measure something, it wasn't real." Hannah walked to a window and looked out at the twisted space around their ship. "But when we finally accepted that impossible things were real, we did something that no other species had ever done. Instead of just hiding from the monsters or trying to make peace with them, we immediately started figuring out how to kill them, and that made us different, very different. Other species learned to avoid the monsters, to build walls, to keep them out, or to sacrifice some of their people to keep the monsters happy. We learned to hunt. All across the galaxy, human ships patrolled the dark spaces between stars. These were places where normal physics broke down, where reality became thin and weak. They had once been the monsters' favorite hunting grounds. Now they were humanity's territory. Young humans trained in schools that taught impossible subjects. They learned mathematics that worked backward through time. They learned to fire weapons that existed in 7 dimensions. They learned to keep their minds stable while looking at creatures that drove most people insane. The monsters still existed. They probably always would. But now, when they emerged from their hidden realms to hunt and feed, they found armed humans, waiting for them. On the bridge of reality's edge, Admiral Lee received a message from an old friend, Ambassador Viltar. The Altarian who had tried to warn him years ago, now worked as humanity's representative to the Galactic Council. Admiral Lee Veltar's insect-like face appeared on the main screen. "I wanted to thank you personally. The reality breach in our home system has been contained. Your monster response cores eliminated 3 Class 7 entities in less than an hour." Lee nodded. "Just doing our job, Ambassador." "No," Veltar said, his 4 eyes blinking slowly. "You're doing something that no species in the galaxy has ever done before. For thousands of years, we've lived in fear of these creatures. We built our civilizations around avoiding them. We shaped our entire cultures around the knowledge that there were things in the dark that we could never defeat." Veltar paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "But humans looked at the ultimate predators of the galaxy and decided they could be killed, and then you went ahead and proved it." After the communication ended, Lee stood alone on his bridge, watching his ships patrol the endless darkness. He remembered something he had read in an old book when he was a child. "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams." The monsters had taught humanity that reality was not fixed, that the rules of the universe could be bent and changed. So humanity had learned to bend and change those rules right back. They had become the thing that monsters feared in the dark, and across the galaxy, for the first time in millions of years. Other species could sleep peacefully, knowing that humans were standing guard in the void.